about a minute. Let me just say, on behalf of the Sports Business Institute, welcome. My colleagues at the Institute are hoping that everybody is getting through this situation, this crisis, physically and mentally strong, and that we come out stronger on the other side as individuals, as a country. Welcome to our first series on the panel on college athletics. This one is the future of college sports in the face of financial challenges. And we have a great panel who Gene Doris will introduce in just a second. I just want to touch on next week. This is a series, so next week we'll have another panel. Will be on the ebb and flow of intercollegiate athletics, what the new model might look like. If there are changes coming, and there probably are, and there already have been. We have Dr. Mark Reed, the president of St. Joseph's University, Dan Coonan, the commissioner of the ECAC, Dr. Marilyn McNeil, the vice president and director of athletics at Monmouth University, Jeff Orleans, the former Ivy League commissioner, now a consultant for the Knight Commission. Very important because they are kind of tackling these situations. And then on the following week, it's going to be about the jobs, where the jobs are, what the experts think people should be looking at, or where they should be looking. We are planning a panel on race relations and the sports industry. We have some great panelists already lined up. I think it's very important to note at this time that diversity and inclusion is very important to us, whether it's panels that we've done at Manhattanville College on women in sports, the one we're going to be doing on race relations. We are 100% on board with Black Lives Matter. So no question about that. And we will be hopefully addressing some of the issues that we are now facing and have been facing as a nation in the sports industry or not. And we hope to be, part of a solution to that. With all that said, I'd like to introduce the moderator for today's panel, dear friend of mine, colleague over the years, Gene Doris. Gene is helping the Sports Business Institute in many ways after serving as the director of athletics at Fairfield University for many years. He is a member of the NACDA Hall of Fame. He's been on tons of committees, boards, etc. He's a former coach. He's a true asset to what we're trying to accomplish here. And he's the man who made me wear a tie today. So ladies and gentlemen, Gene Doris.
Thank you, Dave, for the kind words. And I echo Dave's comments with the Sports Business Institute being committed to Black Lives Matter and also to working toward getting to solutions. And hopefully in the panels that we have going ahead, we'll be able to send some messages out to practitioners to be helpful to them in all of this. The reason that we chose this topic in this series is mainly to reach out to non-Power 5 schools, Division II, Division III, because a lot of the panels that we have listened in on over the past number of weeks have dealt with COVID-19 and return to campus and what sports might be. And in addition to that, name, image, and likeness has been out there, all obviously very important terms and very important things to look at. But the main thing for us is to take a look at a lot of the things that a lot of administrators are going to be facing very quickly, like over the next week or so. So, I know that a number of people are going to their boards of trustees with budgets right now. So nearly 100 sports teams have been cut so far. You have 3 schools, the private schools, institutions in Division II and III that have closed their doors. Akron Athletic Director Larry Williams was ordered to chop 23% or $4.4 million from his budget. The school dropped men's cross country and golf and women's tennis 2 weeks ago. And there will be other spending and staff reductions there. And what Williams noted was that the accounting system at the university, and he said pretty much around a lot of his colleagues that he's heard from, do not consider anything but the cost side of athletics, and they don't look at the revenue side of athletics and what athletics brings to an institution. Former University of Ohio president Chuck Staben said he did a study analyzing the tuition that's derived, and you'll hear about some of that today from one of the people on the panel that lived through a situation like that. A week after Brown University putting out the Excellence in Athletic program that they intended to start to drop 11 varsity sports, yesterday, the president of Brown University, President Paxson, came back out and said they were restoring men's and women's track and cross country. They were being taken off the board of the 11 sports being cut. And her quote was, "Maintaining and strengthening diversity was a fundamental principle of the final makeup of the varsity teams from the outset of the Excellence in Brown Athletics initiative. The original revised roster of varsity sports maintained Brown's overall diversity in varsity athletics, but we now more fully appreciate the consequences of eliminating men's track and field and cross country for Black students in our community and among our extended community of Black alumni. One has to wonder the thought process for dropping it in the first place. So that will be discussed, and we'll be talking about that a little bit during the course of the webinar today. So our first person who's going to be on the docket to go forward is Dr. Mark Nemec. On July 1st of 2017, Dr. Nemec became the 9th Ignatian and First Lay President of Fairfield University. Working with his senior leadership, he has positioned Fairfield as a model of the modern Jesuit Catholic University committed to lifelong learning, holistic formation, and expansive partnership. Under Dr. Nemec's leadership, Fairfield has continued its rise as a value-based, student-centric, outcomes-focused institution dedicating to forming men and women for others in pursuit of social justice and productive citizenship. Dr. Nemec is a graduate of Yale University, and in addition to that, he has worked he's got his master's and doctorate from the University of Michigan, and has worked in the private sector for both Forrester and EduVentures. And so he brings a perspective from the on-campus and off-campus community to this panel today. With that, I would like to turn to Dr. Nemec to offer his some initial statements of what he thinks the role of athletics will be in the new normal.
Thank you, Gene. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. One of the things as university president, one always has to be mindful of is being responsive to the moment while also ensuring that we're keeping the bigger picture, the longer term in mind. And I really want to, in my remarks, focus on not just what athletics means now in this moment, but what athletics means to us as a university and for us in the longer term. And with that in mind, one always has to think about one's strategy and purpose. And as you alluded to, Gene, here at Fairfield, we are dedicated to forming men and women for and with others, with a simple idea that we are value-based, student-centric, and outcomes-focused. And athletics is central, not ancillary to that. It's central in three primary ways. First and foremost, having played rugby at a fairly serious level, both in college and beyond, one of the things we recognize that we are here to form our students, not just in the classroom, but holistically. And athletics certainly is a significant portion of that. It is significant to the formation and to the overall development of our student athletes. But secondly, and just as importantly, and especially in this moment in time, we are dedicated to the vibrancy of our community, the importance of us as a community coming together to reflect and to address issues. And athletics is really an instrument to do that. And so if you think about those two perspectives, the idea that we're focusing on the formation of the student athlete, but also that athletics is absolutely essential to the vibrancy of our community, of us gathering, but also reflecting, those are two very obvious elements. But the third, and this is why Fairfield as a mid-major is committed to competing at the Division I level, is that we also recognize this is a way for us to tell our story more broadly. Right, the opportunity for the Fairfield identity and the Fairfield mission to be understood in athletics as an introduction to that Jesuit mission and to that commitment as we have to the formation of these young men and women means for us, athletics is not simply an ancillary investment. It's part of our overall story. And I think that story continues to need to be told. In this moment, we realize it's a challenging time, but we also recognize that our role as Fairfield is to pursue excellence, not just in the meaning in the moment, but going forward. And athletics are absolutely essential to that.
Mark, how do you, if you were giving a boilerplate advice to other presidents at other colleges and universities, what would you say to them as they look forward in the times ahead that are going to be troubled, that they should use as kind of a measuring stick for how they view their athletic program when they go into meetings with regard to budget?
Oh, well, I realize I'm biased, having been, a fairly serious sort of club athlete, and then again playing semi-pro rugby. So I see the value in athletics, but I think one of the things that's important for all of us to be mindful of is, how does athletics fit into our overall narrative, right? And again, as for Fairfield, as a Jesuit Catholic institution, where the whole person, mind, body, and spirit, is absolutely essential to how we approach our education, you can see how it fits. Now, I recognize that different institutions have different approaches to the education of their students. And for some, it might be central. For others, it might be ancillary. I think the other piece of it, as I alluded to, is that for Fairfield, we really believe and have seen that athletics is an instrument that can really help bring our community together. And so as we see and are committed to, most all of our students live on campus, essentially. So the idea of a community and the role athletics has as part of that community is also another thing that is unique to Fairfield, but again, one of those things that I think every president has to balance. And lastly, as I said, for us as a mid-major, as a school of master's comprehensive that is extremely well known in the region, but not nationally, we also see athletics as an instrument to tell our story more broadly. So I think, for university presidents, I think every institution is unique, and I'm loath to give any advice, but I would say making sure that athletics is understood in the framework of the broader ambition and purpose of the institution is essential. And I think that's for us always been the touchstone.
Thanks, Mark. One more question before we move on. A lot of the demographics are now showing that applicant pools are going to be severely challenged in the years ahead. How do you and other college presidents look at enrollment management as being a major factor in terms of what the future is going to hold for colleges and universities?
Well, enrollment management is central for us because we are motivated to reach broader audiences, right? As a faith-based institution, we want to offer the gift of a Fairfield education to as broad a population as possible. And so it's clearly making sure we are able to attract students of quality from across all backgrounds is central to what we are strategizing around. We are very fortunate in that we are running counter to trends, and that we actually have seen our largest applicant pools ever in these last 2 or 3 years. There's a variety of reasons for that, and we've seen our largest incoming classes ever. But every university president has to be mindful of what it is that is attracting students. And I know in conversations with a number of presidents, many have actually launched sports, especially at smaller schools, because they see that as a way of getting more students interested in their institution. We haven't done that at Fairfield. We haven't had to do that, fortunately, but we recognize that we are attracting students not just to be part of a sitting in a classroom. We are attracting them to be part of a community. And regardless of whether they are a student athlete or not, athletics is part of that community.
Right, Mark. Thank you for your insight, and we'll be back to you for some closing comments later. Our next panelist is Richard Berman. Richard Berman was selected by Manhattanville College to serve as its 10th president. He is credited with the turnaround of the college. He really took over at a crucial time in the history of Manhattan College, where both enrollment and finances were certainly looking to, let me put it this way, the fat lady wasn't singing yet, but as it goes in the opera world, she was warming up in the wings at this point. So he is credited in the New York Times with being a person who really led to the turnover in saving Manhattanville College. He is currently serving as Associate Vice President for Strategic Initiatives and for Innovation and Research at the University of South Florida. He has served on many, many committees, both on the state and national level, has been an advocate and consultant for social justice. He received his BA and degrees from Michigan. And with that, I would like to turn it to Richard for him to give some insights as to how athletics actually helped him save Manhattanville College.
Well, thank you. And thank you and Dave for putting this panel on and the others to follow, and to those people who tuned in. First of all, let me declare that I was never a student athlete. I was never good enough, nor did I have the discipline to be a good athlete. So I come at this slightly different, and I come at it from a view of what's best for the student. And I knew that if we were doing something very special in a very special way that would benefit the student, that at the end we would do well both in recruiting and in fundraising and in the other components. So being focused on the student, it was important for me to understand again where athletics or where the arts or where the theater or where the other components of the academic program belong. And I believe, that there is a real knowledge and skill set that is delivered through athletics. It's about leadership, it's about responsibility, it's about dependability, and it's about team. We teach that in the didactic section of most colleges today, but athletics is a place where it is applied and tested and retested, and we know those students who, in the area of athletics, can't hold up on responsibility, dependability. So it is not only a way that it's applied, but it's a way it's tested. Number two is it's good for the school. We, like our colleague with Mark, came from a value-based education, and we had 4 values in the school. One was academic excellence, and I'm proud to say my student athletes had a higher grade point average than my non-student athletes as a group. The second was to develop the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. And we don't have to sort of dwell on that. The third was in a nurturing, caring, supportive, diverse community. And later I'll talk about the importance of diversity, both on the campus and in today's life. But the fourth was a commitment to make the world a better place. We wanted our students to leave not only with this as a value, but having time to practice it. And I think as Mark talked about in terms of the vibrancy on the campus, I mean, who else do you get to help lug all the furniture and bags and everything that freshmen bring into a campus? Where else do you get people that'll do the midnight runs, et cetera, and be involved in community service, representing the college, representing the student body, and representing the values that we wanted the community to see that we did. But the fourth, or the, I guess, the third major point I want to make is in today's world, where we're ready to acknowledge and say there are some underlying injustices, discrimination, barriers, whatever you want to call them, that affect minorities in terms of getting into colleges, retaining in college, and graduating. And if you look across the system, you will see that. We have to acknowledge it. We acknowledged it at Manhattanville College. And I can tell you, the athletic programs had the best records of recruitment, retention, and graduating, especially Black males, and also Latino males, and also in the female. But the biggest sort of growth that we could see was, or the biggest elimination of disparity was among our male athletes. They had a bigger commitment to study because they wanted to stay in school. The coaches were on them in a better way to stay in, and they graduated at a higher rate. So I think sort of sometimes old solutions help solve today's problems. And I would say if we're honest about the disparities in minority education, you can talk about grade school, high school, I'm talking about colleges, then one of the best remedies for the problem is athletics.
Richard, you, at a time when I talked about earlier that 100 varsity programs athletically have been dropped, you facing the economic crisis at Manhattanville actually added to what people would consider expensive sports, men's and women's ice hockey. What was your thought process involved in that?
Again, the thought process was that three things. We also, while we did that, we realized to protect the students and to promote excellence, we would also have to hire full-time coaches, not only there, but in other sports, trainers, upgrade the training areas, upgrade the doctor areas. So it was a major decision. Not everybody on the campus thought it was a healthy decision. And Dave's laughing, but some of you know my faculty, and Nick's there and survived. But we felt that, again, since diversity was important for us, since building the whole person, body, mind, spirit, and heart, it fit into our program. And I believe strongly that if, in fact, you are true to your values and you provide something that is good for the customer, hate to use that word, that it will pay off. And boy, it did. People found and wanted a small, nurturing campus where the president knew everybody by name, or whatever it was that gave a sense of we're committed to them and having them leave better than they entered. And that helped us in recruiting. It helped us in bringing our alumni back. It helped us in developing a vibrant campus. From what was, when I got there, 600 and some odd students, very few of them living on the campus. Hard to get that vibrancy, if you will, in a commuter sort of feel. It opened up to recruiting across the world. Kids interested in hockey from across the world, not just from parts of New York or Pennsylvania, et cetera. And so, but it was part of this whole concept that if you provided the energy and, as Mark said, the vibrancy on campus and the visibility, it widens the net for recruitment, for giving, for community support. We had a lot of support. Some of our neighbors, in fact, helped particularly support those programs because of the viability of the college.
Richard, last question before we move on. You're at a Division I state institution right now. You were at Division III Manhattanville. Is there a difference of the challenges ahead at the state institution level versus the private institution level? Or is it really the same challenge that we're going to be seeing all athletic programs face on these college campuses?
Well, I think there's a series of challenges that are the same. There is a view by some that only what happens in a classroom is an important piece of higher education, or it's the only piece of higher education. And so it's all measured there by number of faculty per student, or et cetera, and everything is, quote, extracurricular or not as important and not as part of the fiber. And that's a tendency that my experience says shows up everywhere. Number two is different colleges have different success records, being honest, about recruitment and retention and graduation rates of not only the minority, but all their student athletes. And so they face a different challenge. And the third challenge I would say that some face is, what is the mission of that college? And I would argue from where I sit that state universities, whether they're Division I or they're junior colleges, have even more of a responsibility to deal with minority excelling and success. And when you then say that's part of your mission, I think they have to come back around and say, if we want to do that, we can't do it by adding 6 more professors in chemistry. We can't do it by adding this new academic program alone. We need things that really address those problems. And it's at the front end, which may be, sort of what we'll call gap programs to make sure that the students are prepared to be successful in college. It is special attention while in the academics, but also something that will give them a target, give them a reason to stay in and compete in a healthy way with their friends on other teams about who's got the best grade point average. So I think that the Division I, again, you have to come back to, Mark said better than I, you have to know what the value is, what is your mission. I believe part of the mission for specifically publicly funded institutions is to deal with this gap in our education with minority students' success and completion.
Thank you, Richard, and we'll be back to you for some closing comments after as well. Next on the panel is Andy Fellingham. Many institutions hire consulting firms to look at their athletic program and evaluate it. I think sometimes going into a consultant, they don't exactly know what they want from the consultant. But the consulting world seems to be driving a lot of decisions that are being made on college campuses. Andy Fellingham manages the Intercollegiate Athletic Consulting Company, a comprehensive full-service group that uses the academic mission of an institution as the basis for any decision-making within its athletic program. He comes from a background in the business world. He served as deputy CEO of Bank Austria Credit Anstalt, where he managed a $15 billion asset liability area. And so he brings a business sense when he goes to a campus and consults. With that, I want to turn it over to Andy to talk about the role that consultants play in evaluating intercollegiate athletic programs within a college.
Thank you, Gene. I feel a little bit like Stephen Colbert, doing his show from the basement of his house here. I'm looking at myself and wondering. But when I was in charge of 15 billion was really 15 billion, not like it is now. But the role of athletics, I'm following 2 presidents. And the 2 presidents both spoke about the role. In my 20 years of working with colleges, most presidents have an idea of a role. Most presidents can express that role orally. The ADs can express it orally. Then I get to the Board of Trustees and I find a slightly different idea of what the role is. Then I get to the donors and I find another role expressed. I get to the student athletes, I get to the regular students, you get to the greater community, you get to the alum. And then at the end of it, I now, as I'm trying to define the role of athletics at a campus, I have 15 to 16 different explanations. It's important for the CEO of an organization to know why he has that department, whether the department be athletics, philosophy, or snow removal, right? Unless you're in the University of Southern Florida, then you don't worry about snow removal. But you have to know why you have it. And that's what we like to do. We come in and we say, everybody has an opinion, but you haven't institutionalized the reason. You have to write it down. And it's not a very big document. Maybe it'll take 2 paragraphs if you're verbose. Normally it'll take 1 paragraph. What is the role of athletics on your campus? Number 1, as both presidents have mentioned, what is your academic goals and mission at that institution? If athletics harms that in any way, you can't do that in athletics. If athletics is making a decision to add or drop sports, you can't do that if it harms the academic goals and mission. Unless, of course, you have no academic integrity. Then you can do whatever you want, but most of the schools I've worked with have academic integrity, and we don't have to worry about that. Then you have to look at how does athletics meet with enrollment management and student profile. So if you're writing up the role, you'd say, okay, we want to know, which both presidents have mentioned again, what's the GPA, what's the retention, what's the graduation rate? What's the diversity, racial, geographic, ethnic, gender? Where do we want to be, and what do we want them to help us to achieve? And then that's with the student athletes when they're on the campus. And then you can turn it into the recruiting by your coaches. Here is who we want you to recruit. Because again, in a lot of D3 institutions, the academic profile of the incoming freshman student athlete is higher than the incoming academic profile of the general student body. And that's because the coaches go out and pick 5 or 6 people they're recruiting for a position, and they get the ones who match up to the institution's academic profile. And when you move on, how else do you look at the role? You look at the role of, does it bring visibility and image? Many arrests can bring visibility. That's not the type of visibility most athletic programs want. You're sending out a group of students wearing a uniform that has your name on it, according to whether you're in Division 1, 2, or 3, 1,000 miles from your campus, 200 miles from your campus, or a subway ride away if you're dealing with the City University of New York. But you're going to a different neighborhood. It's an advertisement. Are they ambassadors of your institution, or are they not ambassadors? In almost all the cases I've seen, the vast, vast majority are ambassadors of their institution. So when we look at it, you say, oh, if it's all this wonderful, why would people talk about dropping sports? So we get to the famous question, what do we know about athletic departments and why do we know it? In the 1960s and 70s, you'd look at athletics and people would talk about, oh, look at all the scholarships. Look at all the money they're spending on scholarships. Nobody had a number, though, because nobody knew how many scholarships were being given. But they'd come back with, but the University of Texas band gives more scholarships than the entire athletic department. So if your kid wants to get a scholarship, he has to learn how to play a tuba, right? So now we move forward. We get into the 1990s, and a thing comes out called the EADA report, the Equity in Athletics Disclosure Act. And in this, the government, in fabulous way the government works, because I filled out IRS forms for many years, they work up all your costs, all your expenses. Let me see your expenses. And they really don't get, there's a number there for revenue, but most schools, after they figure out the expenses, they plug in a revenue number that matches, because they just take the fall between the ticket sales and the cost of the athletic department, and they work it into the general budget. So what happens is we have a very fine way of looking at all the expenses within the athletic department. What other department, especially on the academic side of the school, do we have comparable figures for? In the majority of the schools I've worked at, none. You may know what it costs for physical plant. You may know what it costs in capital costs for physical plant. You don't understand what it costs for the engineering department or the philosophy department. So now we start looking at athletics. you have to work in their pluses and minuses. So this goes back to basic cost accounting, which again, I'm a product of Wall Street from the 80s and the 90s, where they went in and said, we have to reduce expenses. We have to reduce expenses. At times, you have to look at the revenue side, because you can keep cutting and cutting, and then eventually you're not cutting out fat, you're cutting muscle. You're not cutting muscle, you're cutting bone, which I guess Brown figured out when they figured out that they were missing a diversity issue, since they didn't know what the role of that athletics program and that specific team was within their organization. So when you go through this and you look at it, you have to look at teams. We recently did a study where the school was a Division I FCS school, and they had 24 sports, and they don't need 24 sports, they only need 16. The board was pretty sure, and the president and the cabinet, we can get rid of some of these sports. And I said, well, what ones are you looking at? The ones that don't sell tickets, probably, right? Right. I said, you'll look at golf. Oh, yeah, golf. Oh, how about fencing? They don't. Oh, yeah, fencing is a good one. So then what you do is you get the numbers from financial aid, and you say, well, how much institutional financial aid are you giving to this team, the golf team or the fencing team? And the number comes back that nobody on either team receives any institutional financial aid. They're, in the words of admissions people, the fabulous golden fleece, a full freighter. They pay 100% of the tuition, 100% of room and board. They're the golden fleece. Everybody wants them. The more you can get, the better. At this school, let's, for argument's sake, say the tuition was $50,000. The discount rate, a private institution, was about 50%. So the normal student on that campus paid $25,000 in tuition. The normal student athlete of the 12 golf members paid 100%. So he was incrementally, those 12 people produced $25,000 apiece. $25,000 apiece, that's worth $300,000 a year. But we have expenses for a golf team. Okay, what are the expenses? You run them up, the annual cost and everything, 50 grand, and they have a part-time golf coach who they pay $5,000 for. The golf team has a long-time part-time coach who was an alum of the school, who knows how to raise money. They had $55,000 in annual cost, including his pay, and they raised $67,000. So they're making profits on both the income side on tuition, and they're making profits, which is very unusual. The fencing team wasn't as good. At another school we went into, and we're looking at club sports, and we're looking at varsity sports. This is right after the two.
I think we've lost Andy's internet. Okay, we'll come back to Andy. Are you there, Andy?
Yes.
Okay,
Hello?
we lost you for a bit.
Oh, so we're looking at their, they want to cut $200,000 from the athletic budget. When they cut the $200,000, as usual in the D3 institution, the AD runs both varsity athletics, club sports, and intramurals. If you're an AD, what are you going to start subtracting from first? They'll go after club sports and recreation first. Normally, I shouldn't stereotype, but they'll normally do that. So the equestrian team, which had 45 women on it, they took $25,000 away from its $50,000 budget, and they saved $25,000, no doubt about it. I come in 2 years later, in 2010, there are now 15 women on the equestrian team. When they had 45, there was not one dime of institutional aid. Again, basically the same. It was around $50,000. They were losing close to $600,000 a year when you worked it out. I said, there was no doubt about it. You saved $25,000, but you're losing close to $500,000 a year. You keep that up long enough, you go out of business, because people can only look at the expense side of athletics and they misread where you come in on the athletic side. And now it says my internet connection is unstable. I ain't maybe unstable at the end of this.
Okay.
But
Yep.
cost accounting, when you look at it, when you first come to a college on cost accounting, and you show them the numbers that athletics produces, in reality, when you count all the income, most people don't want to believe it. And that's the problem. They become uneducatable. They say they're educators and they don't want to learn from the numbers. And the real number, if you look at it, is scholarships. And every private institution who gives scholarships, they put in whatever the full freight price is of scholarships. Again, $50,000 in tuition. Boom, athletics is charged $50,000. Meanwhile, everybody else who comes into the school is at a 50% discount. They're charged $25,000. Why do you charge athletics, internally, to know where you really are? You should be charging them $25 to look at it. And then you say, besides athletics, who else gets the use of this student athlete on campus? The other person is an academic department that student athlete majors in. Shouldn't they have some of the cost of the institutional financial aid move to the major, whether it be engineering or business or nursing? Again, that is a decision made on the campus level. But we come in and we show people, this is exactly where you're spending money. This is what they're bringing to the table for you. Please appreciate it. And since I'm pretty good with numbers, having come from Wall Street, I can normally talk with trustees and get them to understand what the numbers really mean. I'm done.
Thanks, Andy. We have one panel
Back to you,
that has a
Gene.
hard stop.
Is everybody frozen?
And I don't want to have an interruption with Nick. So quickly, I'd like to go back to Mark Nemec and just ask if you had any closing comments.
Well, yeah, I apologize, but the current moment as we're planning for reopening means that we're back to back here. I mean, I think I would echo one sentiment that we started with, and that is, I think one of the things in this very fraught moment in time, as we see the unrest in our country and see the need for healing, and one of the things as universities we are committed to is being an instrument of healing, and the more that we can use athletics as a vehicle, which they already have been, for access and for ensuring that our universities represent the great tapestry that is this country, I think the better we all are. And I think this notion of athletics as an engine for social change is a whole nother webinar we could do, but I think is one of those very important streams that I don't want to lose sight of in this conversation.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you very much for taking out of your day, knowing the college presidents right now are probably doing more work than they've ever done during this time of the year. And once again, thank you for your expertise and what you brought to the panel today. So now we go to Nick. And Nick Kumar is the Chief Revenue Officer of Lion Sports Marketing, a joint venture between JMI Sports and IMG College Athletics, formed to serve as the multimedia rights partner of Columbia University. Nick came to JMI from Manhattanville College, where he had a number of various roles as a vice president, overseeing enrollment, retention, financial aid, and development projects. He served on the senior leadership team at Manhattanville College. Prior to and some of the other things that he's done, he worked for Octagon Sports Marketing, one of the leading sports marketing companies in the United States. He holds a master's degree in sports management and Bachelor of Arts in communication, both from Manhattanville College. He was a Division III student athlete. And knowing that he's the guy that's going to help everybody fill in the revenue side of the blank, I'm going to turn to Nick to talk about what he sees in the revenue generation changes that are going to come out of this pandemic to be helpful to schools as they look to try to sell the revenue part of what athletics brings.
Thanks, Gene. Dave, thanks for having me. I think this is it's been a delight to just be on this panel with presidents, former presidents, folks that I know really well, in Richard Berman and yourself, and of course a legend like Andy. So I think this is really this is going to be fun to be a part of, and I'm enjoying the elements of trying to understand, quite frankly, what's in store for us in the future. And as a company, JMI Sports, as you mentioned, Gene, represents a select handful number of institutions across the country, as well as conferences. So that ranges from the big SEC, ACC schools like University of Kentucky and Clemson and Georgia and Notre Dame and Pitt to the Ivy League. And within the Ivy League, Harvard and Columbia. And my role specifically, as you mentioned, is working directly with our leadership team at Columbia to try to create partnerships and build a sponsorship platform that can elevate what we do to bring in revenues for our student athletes and enhance the programmatic experiences they have. So, Gene, as you mentioned, I think what we're all wrestling with is what the future holds, the uncertainties, certainly in markets that we are doing business here in the Northeast, in New York and Boston, lead to where we might see ourselves. A month from now might be different from where we might see ourselves 3 months from now. However, in these last 3 months, I will tell you that the intent and need to be extremely goal-oriented and focused on our planning efforts has been paramount to what we've been doing. So understanding there are the intangibles that we cannot control. However, what we're trying to find is, as a team, is the opportunities that tie to the institutional goals of driving forward certain initiatives and how we might create those partnerships with multinational companies across the world as well as here in the country to help them connect those pieces. So, for example, platforms is an area that I think we've all talked about in different capacities, whether that be directly tied to diversity and inclusion, which we've talked a lot about today and we will talk about in the future, women's empowerment initiatives, esports. I think you've all seen and we've all noticed that esports, the way it has come out in the last couple of years, and all of us want to find a way to get involved, and we're still trying to identify what that means. And at JMI Sports, we were able to create some synergistic partnerships with Gen G, a leading esports company, to deliver some interesting, engaging opportunities for sponsors and partners, as well as for the universities to create a wider base of reach during a time like this. In addition to that, you will find that where, every single college campus is dealing with today, and if you talk to presidents, athletic directors, cabinet members, wellness, whether that be mental health wellness or physical wellness or emotional well-being of their student athletes, how do you address that? So how do you take a platform, again, and I'm using an array of them, it would vary for each institution, but how do you take a platform and tie that to a intriguing opportunity for partnership creation via the channel of athletics? So that's what we are trying to focus our efforts on, is delivering in this time frame digital platforms that can allow for alumni engagement, recruitment opportunities that, specifically with any number of our institutions, but in our case, the Ivies in Columbia, Harvard, or Penn, and how do you create an access point to engage alumni through a digital channel that has the connecting points of social engagement, that has the connecting points of being able to deliver for a broader base, not just a consumer that is a parent or a fan, but also for a company that has social change and sustainability and initiatives that from their corporate philanthropic side tie. So we have to go out and try to find those companies, try to find those brands, and try to help them understand that we are not just giving you a traditional sports marketing avenue and outlet, but we're trying to create a synergistic partnership that is based on a multitude of those areas that I just talked about.
Yep, you had talked a little bit about talking about, for example, Jeep. You said traditionally, just so that some of the practitioners out there understand what you're saying, Jeep would want to bring a car to campus and display it. And you're saying now when you go to Jeep, how would you pitch that to Jeep now instead of the traditional way of bringing your car to campus?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Gene. The traditional sense of sports sponsorships, of course, can revolve around a few things. And a big part of that is engagement and impressions on site in venue. That on-site in venue is a complete question mark right now, certainly where we are and certainly in other parts of the country as well. So not knowing how to deliver that is it's a candid conversation. We would like to be able to create a very opportunistic digital platform that helps still engage them with the B2C opportunity to connect to clients, which would be consumers, in this case, fans that are engaging on digital channels that the universities are putting out. And secondly, lead down the path of being able to understand and recognize what an activation might look like. Activations are different based on experiences that different brands are looking to have. So an activation for us at Columbia at our football game is delivered in a way that is highly structured and allows for visibility and fan engagement when they come to the stadium. That, of course, is an unknown that we don't have answers to until at least July, if not in the future. So I think what we're finding ourselves doing is, whether it's Jeep or BMW or Mercedes or any other auto partner that a campus might look to have, and that the auto partner wants to have, because in this given time and age, we all know that they're also reeling in a sense, and so much is happening in the auto industry that they can't control. So I think you're seeing budget shifts and investment shifts from their perspective as well, which allows us to help be consultative in our process and help them understand that perhaps the need for spending on activations can be shifted more towards digital and platforms.
Great. What's your advice to college administrators and coaches going forward in terms of when the new normal comes online? What is that going to be in terms of activation, in terms of all of that? What role are they going to play for you? You're making the initial contacts and you're doing a pitch. What do you need from college administrators and coaches going forward to make you be able to do the job you need to do successfully?
Great question. I think whatever the new normal is, which is going to vary from university to university and from state to state, it's going to be imperative to have our administrators at the highest level, at whether they be in athletics or across the campus, understand and recognize that we all, at every institution, we're not immune to budget cuts and budget salary reductions, and we've already seen that through this transitional phase. So how do we create revenue opportunities, and how do we engage them to help engage their alumni? And how do we engage them personally in helping drive these conversations at a broader level with the brands and the corporate partners that have the capacity to partner and the interest? So I'm fortunate enough to say that, in our work, whether that be at Columbia or whether that be at Harvard or the Ivy League, very hands-on administrators that are willing to take the time to go on a trip or visit with a brand and talk to them and help them understand the core missions and values that you heard Richard and Mark talk about at institutions, and what the end goal and end result is to create an engagement tool for them to be able to elevate what they're doing and really tell their story of their student athletes, because we've heard it all throughout. The student athletes at large Division I institutions, mid-sized Division I institutions, or Division III institutions, all are going through a process of evolution, and whether that's leadership development or whether that might be creating a future for how they might go about entering the corporate world. Our athletic departments are supporting those initiatives. At Columbia, we've got a terrific program called the Success Through Wellbeing program, and that touches upon the entire student athlete experience, everything from sports psychology to sports nutrition to leadership development to career counseling and advice to tutoring and mentoring services. And so how do you take that and how do you tell that story to not just a brand but also to an alum and help connect that thread through all three? And I think that's what we're trying to do, where administrators and coaches who are doing this every day, as a former coach, as a former student athlete, I will tell you that you live this every single day, and how do you go out and really articulate that is going to be more important now than ever.
Yeah, you had mentioned something that Columbia did just in the last week or so with regard to their rowing program and in terms of reaching out to their alumni. You might want to touch on that and just say,
sure,
that you felt it was a pretty successful effort.
Yeah, and I think you're finding universities do that, but Columbia's doing a terrific job with our athletics development team, and what they're doing is really creating a webinar series like this to create engagement opportunities. It's all about engagement. It's all about, we are in the business of relationships, whether that be alumni relationships, parent relationships, student relationships, or in my case, all of the above, and brand relationships. So how do you strengthen those in a time like this and not be lost in translation because we are so distracted with our everyday lives? And I think what Columbia has done a great job of has been able to tie in a series and take their student athlete awards banquet online, which I know Harvard did as well, and other Ivy League institutions and institutions, including Fairfield and Manhattanville for that matter. So I think when you think about how Columbia leveraged this platform was take their rowing alumni, their current student athletes, and talk about a docu-series effectively that showcased the IRA national championship that they won 2 years ago. And it's a terrific program, and if you have the chance to watch it, please do. And it's on our website. It's on GoColumbiaLions.com. And what it does is it helps open up the dialogue with the alums, the student athletes, and keeps the conversation going. At the same time, creates a digital platform, like we talked about, for us to go out and integrate a partner and have the partner get associated and really own something and be affiliated with such a world-class institution like Columbia.
Do you see the ability? I mean, we've seen traditional signage on college campuses. Some college campuses are open to it, some aren't. What about being able to get people to monetize the digital platform that you're doing? And if they ask you for the ability to have their logo in the upper right-hand corner during these digital webinars that are going on and whatever, or to have something like the backdrop that I have behind me, things along that line. How do you see that playing going forward? Is that the new normal? Is that where we're going, do you think?
I do think so. I think there's going to be a lot of shifts in travel, for example. So you're going to start to see, institutions start to think about where coaches are going out to recruit, where they're going to visit their alumni, where business people are going to look to shift their budgets, and travel is a big expense and big cost center for many of us. So I think when you look at how you might create a digital channel like this and let it live and let it evolve, gives for engagement opportunities and positioning opportunities for brands. Now, having said that, each institution is different. I think at Columbia, we'd be very selective. I think our approach is clean and classy, and it has to be that way. We would do nothing but. And so we will never go out and put 5 brands and let them be all over the screen and distract anyone. I think it would be the right brand with the right message. So if it's wellness, it would be a wellness associated brand, or a hospital. If it was diversity and inclusion, it would be a brand that believes in that and supports those kinds of initiatives. So I think we would be hyper selective in our process. And but having said that, the opportunity to do anything from website optimizations and social media channel optimizations to this is going to become an avenue to develop and certainly cultivate as you look at shifts in. When I look at, I'm just using my examples, you would traditionally look at sports sponsorships as perhaps being your traditional assets of in-game promotions and on-site activations and ticket sales and so forth as drivers for your sports marketing platform. That perhaps is shifting. It's going down to perhaps number 2 or number 3. You might see the digital platforms coming up to 1, and alumni engagement opportunities coming up to 2, and recruitment facilitation for brands that are out west that want to recruit some of the best and brightest student athletes because they have all the skill sets to be successful in the workplace and do wonderful things. And we've seen that, and there's proven models around the world on that. And every one of our presidents talked about that. So I think you'll start to see that shift too. Perhaps the pecking order of traditional sponsorship assets might tick a little further down.
Very good. I think we've covered all the questions that people have had from everything I've looked at and the question that I put forward to everybody. With that, and we'll let Dave close, but I'll go to Richard first and get some closing comments for him.
Yeah, no, I think everybody said it better than I, but I think that athletics has the potential to be the healer, the bringing the community together, both in the college and outside the college, while addressing the real diversity gap in performance that exists. And so I see it as a solution to today's problems and supportive of the university's mission.
Thank you, Richard. Andy?
I would, again, thank you for inviting me. And I would also say every school should make a decision whether athletics is co-curricular or extracurricular or a make-believe minor league franchise. And if you make that decision, you'll go a long way on figuring out why you have that department. Thanks.
One last thing, Andy, you had always also talked about the fact in the planning process that you had mentioned something about the planning situation and how that should be viewed when it comes to crises coming up or economic uncertainty.
Right. The time, well, again, I learned this from the Federal Reserve Bank in the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. The time to make up a disaster recovery plan is not in the middle of a disaster. You're supposed to plan and have an idea if certain things are going to happen, what are you going to do? And it was a classic one I heard the other day, you can't build the plane while you're flying it. And Boeing learned that one too. So good planning leads to good decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Nick.
I would just say that, in the midst of all of this and as the future comes about, it's upon us as institutions to be very thoughtful about our approach and put students first. It's about the safety of the student athletes and the students and reopening the campuses, and every campus has levels and layers deep of planning ahead of them in the next several weeks. And I think we've started to see what professional teams are doing. And having said that, college athletics has played an absolutely life-changing part in my life, and I will tell you that it does for any number of student athletes and people who go on to business careers. And the NCAA has this great tagline, which we all know, which is 98% of us go pro in something other than sports. It might be 99 now, I don't know, but it is true. And when you start to think of the opportunity that athletics has to influence a campus, it goes far beyond just competition on the court or the field, or what they might be doing on the away team's campus. And competing against and representing what's on the front, let alone what's on the back of their jersey. So I think for starters, at Columbia, whether it's looking at the next 6 weeks of what the reopening plan might look like, it's going to be centered around safety of students and student athletes and bringing them back in a way that's going to be really impactful to their futures and their careers, and making sure that our coaches and our administrators all feel the same. And I think what we might see here, where we're talking so much about budgets, is understanding the impacts, not just for year one, but years 3 through 5 and beyond on the decisions you make now and what that might look like 3 years from now, not just short-term savings, but long-term planning.
Thank you, Nick. And I'd like to personally thank everybody. It's been a delight to moderate this, and I really want to thank Dave Torromeo for latching on to this idea of doing these webinar series, and look forward to the ones coming ahead. And with that, I'll turn it back to Dave.
Thank you, Gene. Excellent job. And thank you to a great panel, superb Dr. Nemec, Andy, Richard, Nick, and people who don't know, Nick is a graduate of the program I run at Manhattanville College, master's degree in sport business management. He is a guy. I mean, if you could buy stock in a person, I would buy the stock in Nick Kumar. So but we have a ton of great alumni across the country in all different areas of the sports world. Just a reminder, we're doing this again next week, a webinar. It's going to be on the future, what the future holds for college athletics. We covered the financial aspect today, and a lot of that was tremendous. Dr. Mark Reed from the President of St. Joseph's, Dan Coonan, Commissioner of the ECAC, Dr. Marilyn McNeil, Vice President, Director of Athletics at Monmouth University, and Jeff Orleans, the former Ivy League Commissioner, and now with the Knight Commission Consultant. So join us. Thank you for joining us today. This has been recorded. And while I do love, doing this and the webinars and everything, we'll have this series and we'll have the race relations in July. I can't wait to do this in person again and shake people's hands. And Richard, I know you're a hugger and hug people, and hopefully we can get back to that because it really is, about connections and networking. College athletics is such a great place, not just, for college athletes, but really a great place to start your career. My time at Iona and college athletics and other places, it's just, these are the hardest working people on campus. Let's be honest. The coaches, the administrators, they're great people, and they really care about the student athletes. So, if we can help the cause in any way, we want to do that. So Thank you again for joining us. And hopefully, like I said, we can do this in person someday. I love wearing shorts with a shirt, but at the end of the day, I want to, again, get back to wearing a suit and tie. So thank you all again, and come back next week. Tell your friends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Not to golf here with background. Starting today,
There you
You're
go.
comes back.
You're killing me.
Thanks,
Have a great one.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Do 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 do.